Okay, so here's a look at the schedule for the week. And you can see when we come back, when we have like phys ed and health and computers, as well as libraries. So we can plan ahead in terms of what to bring back. Okay, before the break, I noticed students were really into story writing. So a lot of their stories are kind of lacking the depth of a real story. So I'm going to try to do some mini lessons to try to expand on some of those ideas. So on Monday, I'm looking at a mini lesson on generating ideas for a story, specifically looking at problems, because stories have problems and solutions, and they can kind of refer back to other resources in the classroom or some other ideas of stories they've heard before to help look at some problems. And then on Tuesday, we're going to look at solutions to these problems. So how are they solved? And starting to almost like create a book of the ideas that go with a story versus just the story itself. So this would be part of the planning stage. And then on Wednesday, looking a bit at developing characters. Stories have strong characters. What do we know about them? This is where we can also get into the idea of adjectives. And on Thursday, moving more into the idea of a setting. We can still focus on adjectives. These two ideas may also tie in to the part on community, because depending on the stories themselves, they could look a little bit at what would the community be like, what are some of the resources in those communities, how might the characters use them, what role might that play in the story itself. And then on Friday, I'm trying to kind of expand the ideas a little bit more by looking at the beginning, middle, and end of a story. How can they share their thinking? This is where we can also get into adding a little more into complete sentences and how those may vary from person to person, but really trying to expand on some of their ideas in their writing. Okay, so in math this week, we're really going to start looking at addition, subtraction, and the connection between both. So for Monday, it is Math Talk Mondays, and we are going to look at Explain Everything. And I have a provocation that's going to get them thinking about subtraction. And kind of once they've generated some of their thoughts and wonders and we've put them together, we're also going to start looking at creating groups of different sizes, and then what happens once we start taking numbers away. And we're going to kind of work on the idea of 5. So 5, 10, 15, and 20. So that they kind of have those benchmarks as they start taking things away. On Tuesday, we're going to start introducing the concept of math strings to really try to get them explaining more in terms of their thinking about addition, subtraction, and the mental math part. So we've done a little bit with it. I really want to focus on it. And I'm going to bring in some of the science stuff we're working on with the idea of building shelves of various materials and different sizes. And then putting things on the shelf that would amount to about half of that shelf. And then this will get us into this whole idea, hopefully, with doubles, which would match up to the math strings for the day in terms of what's missing and how we can figure it out. And I'm going to get them to actually add materials to the shelf and start looking at the numbers needed to fill the shelf. So I'll pull different materials and things of different sizes. So then on Wednesday, we're again going to look at the whole idea of math strings and getting students to look at more mental math strategies as well. And then for that day, I have a 3-act math task looking at preparing for going back to school. And they're going to kind of identify what they see, think, and wonder, and then that will lead itself into solving the problem that we will kind of do in the first one with a little more guidance, but with them kind of generating those initial thoughts and ideas to kind of see how that might work, with them then solving the one on Thursday, again with some math strings first, but looking at solving the one on Thursday more in small groups. Again, with this idea for preparing for making cookies, which will overlap in terms of some of the big similar types of ideas as the first one, and looking at how they might solve the problem there too, and showing their thinking from there so that they can kind of see that whole process as well. It has a similar bend as the one on Wednesday, so hopefully they can kind of reflect back a little bit as they're doing their thinking. Now Friday's one is going to connect a little more with proportional reasoning, which is great. So there'll be a little bit of some other stuff coming in from there as well. We'll still work on the math strings. It's still focusing on subtraction, but we can get a little deeper. And it's one on sandwich eating and looking at how they might, again, how could they solve the problem? How could they show their thinking? And we can kind of get into this idea of fair shares and fractions too, as kind of a secondary thought or as possibly that extension for the groups. Two, the numbers are still such that all the students can still handle it, and we'll be able to work through the different ways of sharing their thinking as well. And I'm thinking maybe explain everything might be a good option for some students as well. Okay, so we're also going to look at a new shared reading text for this week. It's a nonsense word play, might even call it kind of a poem. It has a couple of different types of nonsense words in there. There's also a musical component as well, so I think that that will be good in terms of experimenting with music and singing and maybe even like some dancing or playing and beat. It'll also be a good review of color words, sight words, rhyming words. So we can kind of work on a few different reviews. And then we also need to perform the other plays. We need to figure out an audience for it and maybe start the week with reviewing it and then move from there to starting the other play and getting prepared for that.